Marianne's stuff at the bar.
Okay. It is now 10:40, and we're going to start the Community Service Committee. Copy of the open meeting laws are against the wall here. Let's go around and introduce ourselves real fast. I'm Mark Kraft, County Commissioner.
Jim Cavanaugh, County Commissioner.
PJ Morgan, County Commissioner.
Clark Goodett, County Board.
Diane Carlson, Deputy County Administrator.
Joe Lorenz, County Finance Director.
Chris Rogers, County Board.
Constance Meyerdorf, Douglas County Clerk's Office.
Marty Barnhart, Omaha Municipal Land Bank Executive Director.
Ken Holm, Environmental Services Director.
Mike Boyle, Secretary of Staff. County.
And against the wall.
Ken Dolan, Deputy Douglas County Attorney.
Dean Ash, Douglas County Clerk's Office.
Dave Schreider, Land Revitalization Commission.
Okay. The first item is discussion of the interlocal with the Omaha Land Bank regarding tax foreclosure services.
I'll start. Since the land bank became official and they got their new executive director, there's been some conversation between the LRC and the new ED about possible services that can be brought together with their power and jurisdiction to help it move. So at the last meeting, we had a discussion about 3 possibilities. Diane has kind of helped me work through some of this and what's possible, and there are a couple of low-hanging fruits that the LRC has talked about, and I've asked Marty more so now because of the new law to reach out to Claire and Marianne, have a conversation with them because of the city's boundaries and jurisdiction. Most of us that are inside it are covered by them, but Marianne and Claire have a couple of gray areas. So the 2 things that we've talked about, well, we've talked about a lot of things, but some things that are predominant, and Diane, correct me with it, is there are services and land within the city limits that the county attorney is handling right now, that if we can come into common agreement with through the interlocal, would relieve the county attorney's office and be more in line to help Marty and those guys be consistent in what they're doing. So that's kind of what we want to talk about, give the board some questions to talk through, and also just kind of tee up and let the board ask any questions they may have about the possibilities of back office functions with the LRC and the land bank. There are some legislative things that Marty wants to talk about, but I think it'll be a whole lot simpler if we get there through interlocal agreement and make it work out and make sure that Claire and Marianne are kind of at peace with how it affects those outer parts of the county that may not be covered. So this is kind of the opportunity for Marty to explain it, and everybody that may have some uneasiness because of how it may have operated in the past, or just any questions they may have to walk through it. So that's pretty much the setting of it.
First, I have a question. Will this save us money?
It will save the county money. The land bank would be willing to do the foreclosure on these tax lien certificate properties, which would save the cost of having to go through the foreclosure process. At this point, we estimate that the cost could be about $300 per parcel times approximately 600 properties in the first year, which would be next year, November of 2017.
Yes, Mike.
I'm really curious about how the, is it the LRC that's going to be doing this, or is it the Omaha Land Bank or somebody? How do you get control of the property quickly? I mean, years ago, we tried a constitutional amendment because of the property rights that people have, and our timing was about the same as it is now. The ag economy was in the ditch, and so the farmers just came out of the woodwork and said, oh, you're taking our farms, you know, so it failed. So we were trying to get control of these houses before they're totally stripped, totally gone, and they're worthless. What are you doing to avoid that?
Right. In the 2 different arenas we're talking about, let's go to the tax lien certificate arena first.
Okay.
In these properties, we would take them through the normal foreclosure process, much like the county would have done.
Okay.
Offer them at a sheriff's sale, But by legislative authority, the land bank now becomes the default bidder rather than the LRC because of the legislation that's now been enacted by the Nebraska legislature. So the public would have the opportunity to bid for those properties that come to the sheriff's sale that had been tax lien certificates now past the 3-year redemption period. If they want it, the land bank would not compete against them. But if there is no bidder at that sheriff's sale, the land bank would become the default bidder and then market those properties with title in hand to the public.
So this is really just what the LRC, or the,
What the LRC is doing now.
yeah.
Correct. So it takes over the place of the LRC, but it does one more step for the county that the LRC wasn't able to do because of funding, and that is we will pay for the foreclosure and take care of the foreclosure process on behalf of the county.
Do you envision a website like exists now for property that's so that people can see it and decide if they want to bid and so forth?
It will launch tomorrow.
Okay. And I don't mean to overemphasize this, but I'm really baffled by how you plan to get a hold of this property, because we found that, I mean, years ago, that the property was just absolutely trashed. I mean, everything was gone, the plumbing, the toilets, the windows, you know, the doorknobs, everything was gone.
Right.
And do you see that? Is that the condition of the building, homes you're hoping to get, or do you think you will get?
We've been working with the city, and of those 4,000 properties that have that unfit, unsafe designation,
Yeah.
about 400 need to be torn down. So we'll be assisting the city over the next 4 years to help them to tear down those worst homes. We estimate about 1.5 million per year to add to what the city's already doing. The city this next year in 2017 will add $1,050,000 to the demolition budget, which will only tear down about 60 homes. We'd like to add a minimum of $500,000 to that, possibly as much as $1.5 million if we could raise it, to assist the city with another 100 homes total during 2017, and then the same each year, 2018, 19, and 20. To answer your question, probably the biggest dilemma I run into is not funding to buy these homes from people. Finding those people is the most difficult dilemma I have. Finding them and then negotiating the sale. Many of these properties are indeed savable. The bones are good.
Yeah.
The properties are savable, but they're in such a condition that they go longer, go through another winter, another 2 winters, 3 winters, whatever. As you described, they become very difficult to save and very, very difficult to rehab.
Well, I hope you can find some way to do that, because that was the failure. We had a homestead program based on Baltimore, where we would get a hold of a house and we would sell it for $1 to someone. Maybe I'm sure you remember the program. And they could get a city loan for 0% if they needed that. They had to own it, not live in it, but own it for 3 years. And it really was a good way to get people back on the tax rolls. Is this any component at all, or are you going to get away from that?
No, very similar to that. We will seek to acquire the property with the opportunity to cancel the taxes and other liens that are against it. That's great for the
Okay.
investor.
Right.
But then second, sell it for either a nominal or a very low price
Okay, great.
to the people that are seeking it. For instance, tomorrow as the website comes live, one of the first properties I'll advertise is 3305 Saratoga, which is right to the south of the North Omaha Metro Community Campus.
Right.
Right there across the street at 32nd and Sorensen. That property was given to us a month ago. It was donated by the previous owner. Little 500 square foot house, 10,000 square foot lot. I got it for $300 closing costs. I cleaned it out for another $5, so we'll offer it for $6,000. So literally, the price of entry is very, 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 very low, but it gives the opportunity and the requirement to redevelop that home in the next 2 years.
Okay, I'll try not to ask any more questions, but one last one is that I remember when I was on the LRC board that we had properties that would be listed for sale, and we had a lot of people who were buying this stuff and assembling it, and all they wanted to do was make a windfall when they sold it. And we can name names if you want to, but you remember. But anyhow, the deal is, one of the things that I was concerned about, and that I asked at one of those meetings is the city aware of the property that is in this zone that we're selling? And as it turned out, they were notified, and they said, oh my God, that's an area of high redevelopment priority, don't do it. So I really hope that as part of your efforts, that you'll make sure you notify Metro Community College of these things, adjoining governmental bodies, I mean, even businesses. So that they have a chance, if they want to tear down a house and build a parking lot or something, so be it, but it's next to a company that could use it. I'd really like to see us do that, because that could be a heck of a thing, particularly for the governmental bodies if they're trying to get a hold of property. And particularly the city, if they have a redevelopment. I'm always concerned that you know, we would sell something out from under them, so thanks.
Address both of those issues. We address them by virtue of saying to the people that are buying from us, first of all, you have to have a redevelopment plan, have the financial wherewithal to put the property back together. And we do recommend they go to the neighborhood association with their plans and have a letter of recommendation from that neighborhood association prior to us selling it.
Can you include governmental bodies,
Definitely.
metro and things? Okay, good.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right,
And of course,
thanks.
we'll work within these redevelopment areas first, like Prospect Village,
Great.
Deer Park, and then concentric circles out from there to really
That sounds
concentrate.
great, thank you.
Well, and James Steele, the planning director, is an ex officio member of the land bank board,
Okay.
so he's
Yeah,
on
so
top of
since,
that. One thing to clarify, Marty, if I could, the LRC will still be the default bidder on non-city
That is correct.
properties.
Of those properties that are in the county that would affect Claire and Mary Ann's district, those properties would indeed go to the LRC, just like they would now. But we would do the foreclosure on, well, the county would do the foreclosure on those probably, and enact those, Diane, and take care of those, I believe.
Let me ask you a question to follow up on that. Let's say property next to Claire's, which is agricultural. Does he get any notification, or is he on his own to check that out?
I don't believe you'd get any notification, because there's nothing built into the system that would allow that. They'd be properties that would pop up in Douglas County, and we could always show those and in some way watch for those, but again, there's no automatic notification of those in that regard.
I'd like to see you consider that, because, for example, like, I'm not speaking for Mr. Duda, but it seems to me that if there was a parcel, 10 acres or 5 acres adjacent to your land, it'd be something he probably would want to acquire, and I think out of courtesy, it'd be, not for him necessarily as a commissioner, but for any property owner to have the ability to, or a shot at buying something adjacent. We used to do that with vacant lots. We would notify the owners, you got a vacant lot next door coming up, and if you're interested, put your 2 cents in, and it helped. It did help. We got active bidders that were gonna do something. I'm gonna quit talking, I'm sorry.
That one at 54th and Pacific,
Yes, sir.
did you put it on the market?
Not yet. No, 5228 Pacific is specifically the one we're talking about. That property is owned by a Mary Scott. I have yet to be able to reach out to her and find her, and then as well negotiate. It's interesting, the meeting you and I are both at, the gentleman who lives across the street came and addressed that with me after the meeting.
Did he?
He was not
It's
only very
pretty bad.
interested, it was very bad, and he was very concerned for his daughter, which
Yeah.
we see quite often. As you know, that social characteristic for these condemned properties is very real for a family.
54th and Pacific, it's northeast corner.
5228 Pacific is the exact address.
It's really 54th. I used to live
Oh, did you?
on it'd be the southwest, almost corner,
Mhm.
right there.
Right.
So I knew that 54th.
But there's actually 6 properties in that neighborhood, oddly enough, between Saddle Creek and 66, between Leavenworth and Center. There's 6 condemned homes in that area, which is
That's
very
one of the
unusual.
nice areas.
Isn't that amazing?
Where the old tower is. Mark?
Marty, you had prepared statements, I think, or prepared way of introducing what you wanted to talk about. You want to just start?
I sure will. The land bank, as you know from our legislation and possibly from our mission statement, is a catalyst for transforming these distressed properties into community assets. Our goal is to assist the county and the city with obtaining these properties and putting them into a developmental condition. Our goal is not dollars. Our goal is not to make money on these properties. Our goal is to see whole neighborhoods redeveloped for 3 reasons. Number 1, to add density to those neighborhoods, bring people back. And if we can bring people back into neighborhoods, the second will happen, services will come back. We want to see services come back, especially to our northeast Omaha corridor, that area where the grocery stores are vacant, where there's no electrician, no plumber, but density is what's going to take to help that happen. Third, once we are able to get density in services, then we see increases in values. I hear every time I go to Northeast Omaha to speak, as you do as well, what happened to my values. I know some of the reasons for the value changes, but I do know as well that the answer to that is over the next 10 years to address the density problem. Bring people back to these neighborhoods. So as we look at properties like 2221 Florence Boulevard, which was donated to us, it needed to be torn down. And we will pay the $10,000 to have that torn down. That'll be torn down probably next week. That property with the adjacent property will now become a 64 by 134 foot property for somebody like Habitat, Holy Name, Jesu, or even a for-profit developer to build a brand new home on that property. That'll be our intention, to ask the developers to come to us, give us a plan, show us the economic wherewithal, and in turn rebuild that property into something viable for the sake of that neighborhood. We want to work very closely with you as a board, also with City Council, but as well work with the neighborhood associations and work with them to say, please help us vet the right people that would go in and really do the best service for these properties. I understand like you do. We have speculators who may want to come in and purchase these properties, but if they have taxes delinquent, if they have code or other condemnation enforcement violations against them, they will not be allowed to buy our properties. And third, they must develop these properties within 2 years, and if they do not, the properties automatically revert back to the land bank with no cost to the land bank whatsoever. So they know there's a covenant built into the deed. It's a special warranty deed, much like the Land Utilization Commission has given for years. So in turn, that covenanted deed does indeed ensure that they're gonna do what they said they're gonna do. Plus, we'll monitor every quarter how that developer is developing that property. The reason we can do this for development and not dollars is because we do have a tax recapture mechanism with a land bank property. 50% of the proceeds of the taxes come back to the land bank during the first 5 years after it's sold. And so in turn, even though it takes our taxes down by virtue of the subdivisions of governments that will receive them, the land bank receives another funding mechanism to take care of itself for that 5 years after the property's developed. I realize as I ran the LRC and that Dave and I ran it together those 13 years, and now Dave's done such a good job these last 16, the initial on the balance sheet doesn't look like we're making any money, but the long term does. If we can get that third element of values change and really begin to lift the values in our hardest hit neighborhoods, then it's a win-win for our city. The city planners are saying to me in the next 30 years there'll be no vacant lots left in Douglas County. I'll wait to see. It'll be interesting to see if in my lifetime that happens, but they could be right.
In Douglas County.
In Douglas County, they're saying they believe there won't be a vacant lot left. I don't know if that's true, PJ.
I could see if they could say that east of 680.
Right.
Or something like that, but not Douglas County.
So maybe they're saying it, maybe they're thinking city of Omaha,
So you
perhaps.
better start looking for a place.
I guess.
But nonetheless-
There won't be room for goats anymore.
As we place this interlocal in front of you, we want to be that catalyst for assisting. I know it sounds almost altruistic for us to stand with you and say, hey, we're going to give you dollars, but if we can stand and really assist the county with tax foreclosed property, the cities with condemned properties, the banks with their REO properties if they have any, and an individual who doesn't want a property anymore can donate it to us, then it's a win-win. There's 4 different categories of properties we can inventory, make available under these caveats or covenants, and in turn, hopefully see good and viable redevelopment throughout our city and possibly even throughout the county. To answer the initial question again, we would like to head into helping with that foreclosure, paying for an attorney to take care of that, these properties that are within the city of Omaha, and assist with those as well in the Douglas County confines as well. But it comes before you because these are properties that are Douglas County tax lien properties. There's no other way to market these, otherwise they're going to languish on the rolls for the next few years. So we want to help market these because we would be that default bidder.
Dave, do you want to add anything here?
No,
Now,
Go ahead. It's well said.
But Mark, can I add?
Yeah.
I mean, the main reason, like I said, there's some low hanging fruit, but what we agreed to at the meeting last week was to brief the board, let you all ask all the questions so you can understand it, because what we wanted to do was slow roll into a merger of sorts to get this in effect.
That's where I was going to go. Can the LRC and the land bank merge?
At this juncture, we could merge, but the land bank does not have any authority to sell property in Douglas County that is currently held by the land bank. We can only sell property in the confines of the municipality of the city of Omaha. Legislatively, that's the only permission we have. So as I expressed that to the board, Mark, I'll go back to your question in a moment, there's really 2 options that the LRC could have if they want to enact them. First, the land bank could become the back office for the LRC's administration and run the agency with 2 separate boards. An LRC board and a land bank board would operate independently of each other and make their own decisions. The land bank could provide administrative support, much like Dave has done for other counties and for their LRC operations. Or second, there could be a merger of both entities, the land bank and the LRC, and you could bring everything together of finance, inventory, staff, and in turn you would still have 2 boards until some kind of legislative change took place in the future, if it took place at all.
And that was the conversation that you needed the board to hear because, quite frankly, going the legislative route I thought would be murky. And personally, I thought there's some iffy territory because I just think as a whole, the board is going to have some issue with Omaha appointing people to represent parts of Douglas County. And so that's why I want you all to understand how do we get into it and merge it, make it function as one, but still keep the separate entities to function.
Mike, I have one more question, this is Mike. Do you have copies of the interlocal as proposed for us?
No, we haven't started that, but I haven't. I wanted you all to hear everything to make sure that you all were vetted first, and then we could just slow roll into it.
Mike?
I wanted to ask, on the interlocal, I got one question after that too. On the interlocal, I want to ask Diane or any of the legal people here. It seems to me that several years ago, the legislature passed some quasi sort of interlocal agreement that if two governmental bodies join together to do something, that they share their ability to do things, like, you know, whatever it is, they share. If we went together with the school district on something that we could do things that we normally couldn't do that the school district does, that we actually merge some of our responsibilities. Is that true, or is that a pipe dream? Am I off beam totally?
Well, the Interlocal Agreement Act allows two separate political subdivisions or municipalities to, by interlocal, agree to handle things jointly, but it's my understanding you have to have the authority individually, each governmental entity, in order to do that. And there's different ways you can do it. You can form a whole separate entity, you can stay separate but just agree to certain things together. But I guess I'm in this circumstance, I guess I'm not really sure.
Okay.
What is it a concern that they don't have the ability to enter into an interlocal?
No,
Okay.
I think they do. I just, in the back of my head somewhere, we had some other interlocals where when we joined with the NRD or somebody, that then we got some of their ability to do things that we didn't have before. I may be really off being totally, but I thought that's what we had. We'll move on. I did want to ask one question. Are you able to get a hold of any commercial property? And I'm thinking about particularly about those little neighborhoods around Military and 45th and 45th and Lake. North of that, there's some abandoned little shops that used to be, really quite. And I'm wondering whether it'd be great if you could tie that into the business incubator at 24th and Lake, where businesses there, a little accounting office could move into one of those at a price they could afford. I think that'd be really something that is lacking. It'd be great to have, if you had that authority to do that.
We do, Mike. We have the authority to begin with those that are distressed, but we also have the authority to go out and negotiate for properties that may fit within the confines of a land assembly or a redevelopment area.
That's great.
So we've got to be careful because it does need to fit criteria of being vacant, abandoned, or at least in the state where it's got distress on it, especially when it comes to tax lien certificates, and we try to abide by that same dictate so that somebody doesn't see us going into a property that would be commercially viable to an open market sale.
I see.
And have us go in and do something that the open market couldn't do by itself.
Got it.
So in the case of a property recently, for instance, First National Bank called me and said, we've got a property at 41st and Hamilton we'd like to sell to you. My first question was, why us? And they said, our normal bidders aren't interested in this property at 4102 Hamilton. I said, okay, what else is wrong with it? They said, there is a tax lien certificate holder on that property. So my first call was to that tax lien certificate holder to see if they wanted to enact their right to go through the foreclosure process. If they would have said yes, I would have stood away. My reason for doing so is we are not in the market to compete.
Right.
We are in the market to serve and redevelop. And so in turn, they said to me a day later, we don't want to go through the foreclosure. We will surrender our right for the tax lien certificate. We will let you have it. So for $8,000, I took it.
Good.
But I renegotiated with the bank down from their $58,500 down to $40,000 so I could be under 50. And in turn, I'll turn the property now after cleaning it up for $55,000.
Great.
And you do pay the taxes?
I do pay the taxes in full, PJ, because if it's a private lien holder, I have to pay them in full.
Yeah, that's our one.
Correct.
thought.
Statutorily, we have to.
50% of that taxes then goes to you for 5 years?
After the property is developed, the taxes that are on the property would go back to us for the next 5 years.
All of it?
50%. 50% of the taxes that are
That's a
accrued
good
on the
deal.
property.
That's a good funding mechanism.
Again, it really changes the focus then
Sure
from
does.
dollars in competition to development. So we can really look at development and say whether we have to tear it down, whether we have to assemble a group of properties, whether we pay more on a balance sheet. In the long run, it helps a neighborhood, helps a community, helps what we're supposed to do.
Thanks.
Clark.
If I lived in Omaha, I'd think this was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I still like the concept, but I'm gonna need help from you on figuring out how can the county be more involved? I mean, Mary Ann is quite right, my neighbors would resent Omaha coming in and making any decisions about the future of any property out there. The county needs to somehow have a voice in the process, and I don't know how to make that happen.
You wouldn't know it this way, Clint. If we did this, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, it wouldn't, the way it would happen, the LRC would still be functioning. The back office stuff would work with them, and Dave would work with them behind the scenes, but up top, the land bank board wouldn't be handling it. It would be doing the common, and that's why, when Marty first bought it and Diane walked this through with me, your feel was what I was feeling when they came. So the two things that I think are really relevant is us working out an agreement with them to take off the county attorney's hands and the cost that Marty shared, those things within the city limits, because they're already doing that per law with land bank. The other thing of this possibility is how do you kind of merge some of these back office functions? The LRC will still function as it does and handle those things outside the city limits. And the land bank will still do the city stuff, but the back office functions that make it run, the process and everything like that would work as one. And that's what I wanted you all to get a feel for.
Thank you.
Diane, you had something?
So I just wanted to clarify that there is an interlocal that's already been drafted and looked at by the county attorney's office that just speaks to the land bank handling the foreclosures that currently the county attorney's office does. So that's one interlocal. And then what Commissioner Rogers is talking about is something perhaps down the line.
And that's what I meant that hadn't been working.
Yeah, which may be an interlocal or something that would talk about whether there's a merger or whether there's some kind of, administrative handling of things. But the interlocal about the tax foreclosure is, I don't know, is it ready to go, Tim Dolan? Or is it?
It is, and if people would like to review it, I can go run copies of it right now to circulate to the committee. But I did want to clarify, and Marty, I think you come back around to this, but the current existing interlocal that we're hoping to get on the county board's agenda is for the land bank to conduct all foreclosures in Douglas County. We would then avoid duplication of efforts. They would have their foreclosure person, and then we would not need to have the county also doing that, although our Linda Richter, who is our foreclosure specialist, would obviously be available to help them in any way that they needed. But right now, the existing proposed interlocal proposes that the land bank conduct all foreclosures for all of the county's tax sale certificates in its inventory right now. And then Marty's correct, under the current statutes, they don't have the ability to become the default bidder for property in greater Douglas County. But they would then, at the end of the foreclosure process, be entitled to be the default bidder for lands within Omaha. But after that, with respect to the areas in greater Douglas County that are beyond their authority, those would go to the Land Reutilization Commission. But that was really the only clarification that I had, is that they are going to do all judicial foreclosures for Douglas County's inventory of tax foreclosures.
Joe, did you have something?
I was just gonna ask, if I may.
Yes.
So remind me real quick, what's in it then? If you guys are going to do our foreclosure process for properties outside of the city, but you can't be the default bidder, what is
Cost.
your motivation to do it?
It's just, there is no motivation other than just assisting with the cost.
Save us the cost.
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound skeptical, but is the long plan then is that this is the first step, get this in place, and then you would become, if we got the second piece done down the road, then you would be able to become the default bidder. So, I mean, this is, if we told you, hypothetically, that we were interested in you doing this, but we're not interested down the, I'm not saying we wouldn't be, but down the road, we're not interested, then you can't ever become the default bidder. You'd still be interested in doing the front end part.
It would.
And because you're interested in...
There's really very few properties that are really outside the Douglas County confines. There aren't very many. You're talking about a scattering of properties in King Lake, Waterloo, possibly Green Meadows. Green Meadows will come up next year, actually in 3 years. Those have now gone under the foreclosure banner, if you will. Tim, am I correct there?
Yes.
And so in turn, there's not going to be very many properties by virtue of percentage. And I know, again, it sounds very altruistic for us to do this, but our donors are saying to us, we want you to head into this to address distressed properties. And as I hear from them, they're saying to me, address these, get them done, even if there's not something in the back end that brings us those properties.
Right.
Mike?
No, that's right.
Am I right by the understanding though? But it would take a statute change to
It
be
would.
able to do what you. Okay, and that's the safety net. And the main piece is now. In all due respect, when we were at the meeting, there was a faster pace this was going, and that's why I brought it in here. Is like we can't go that pace. That's why these two options. This first one that they drafted and prepared, to me was a no-brainer. It's a money cost. The safety hook is the statute change for that. The other piece that Claire, that I'm telling you about, that safeguards the process, we haven't started on, and this is the one I'm saying bet on, because until you felt comfortable with it, I didn't want to do anything with it. And the two specific pieces in there that I told Marty about was when original talk happened about the land bank and Ben was talking about it, I had talked to Ben about an ex officio from the county. My hope was it would be one of the people in this room, but it ended up being the assessor. And I knew the catch was going to be, if it's the Omaha Land Bank, you appoint people from Douglas County, that was like going to be a no-no. So and to get it through the legislation when nobody there had the history with it would be an iffy thing too. That's why we were saying we could get where we wanted to go with the two boards operating like they were. So that's all. And we walk back all of that now. So that's where we're at with it now.
You know,